Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 70 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 15 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Fantasy Playoffs. We're here, and it's scary. It's legitimately scary seeing some of these matchups and knowing that I'm 12-1 in a league, 200 points ahead of people, and I could lose in round one, and that's it. And that sucks.
So everybody that watches the show consistently knows about my 14-man league by now. I have the biggest scare I could potentially have. So I have 3 quarterbacks on my roster. First off is Jared Goff. We love Jared Goff, but he's going up against the New York Jets.
Yep.
Tough. My number 2 quarterback is Mr. Derek Carr. Derek Carr has the New England Patriots against Josh McDaniel. Bill Belichick is the coach of the Patriots.
Yep.
He absolutely will slaughter Josh McDaniels and that offensive scheme. Number 3 is Mike White, who might not play.
That's not the comment that was made yesterday by his head coach.
He might not play because of injury, but I just need him to play. And the worst, the cherry on top, I have to play my girlfriend's dad in round 1 of the playoffs.
Oh,
so,
man. He's going
at
to
least
be in
it's
the
not
chat.
Grandma Bobchi. Bobchi's 2-0 against me.
He's going to be in the chat. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. No. It's over.
All right. Speaking of that chat, that is for a live show that'll be a Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. I know you're not going to the Jets game. I might be going to the Bucks game. I think it's probable depending on the price of these tickets, but I'd say it's a probable, but that won't affect that morning recording. So, and that would also actually be kind of fun if I'm at that game, because then I can't stare at my phone yelling about my fantasy team if I'm actually at a football game. So you know what, that might be better for me, honestly, because if I'm sitting on that couch, I could be pretty miserable. So anyway, but yeah, Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time for round 1 of the fantasy playoffs. We want to help you guys out. We'll go for the entire morning if you need us to. You got to keep asking us questions. We'll keep answering those questions, but it'll probably be from 8:30 to 9:30/10ish, depending on the amount of questions we get. But we want to help you out. 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. The Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. After this Sunday, the next 2 live shows for the remainder of the fantasy playoffs will be on the Saturdays. Due to it being Christmas Eve and having more football games, and then New Year's Eve, just due to my flight on New Year's Day. So it'll be back-to-back Saturdays, but we'll keep promoting that as the weeks go on. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. We do the show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, plus the live show on Sundays. This is the Tuesday show. We'll talk about the news from the weekend. Obviously, there's more injury updates on Mondays than there are Sunday nights. We'll give you the waiver wire players you should be targeting for that upcoming week with the fantasy playoffs rolling around. There's still a chance to get some of these guys off the waiver wire. And then we'll do stash or trash, talk about players that are owned in over 50% of leagues that you may want to cut or you may want to keep for the remainder of your fantasy playoffs. Like I said, you can find the show on all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Anchor. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, hit the subscribe button, drop a like on this video or any other video that you do watch. Keep connecting and interacting with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and then Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Injury updates and some news. Let's start at the bottom of this list here because I think it's the most important one. Deebo Samuel has an MCL sprain/ankle sprain. He's expected to return this season. However, if he returns for your fantasy playoffs, it's probably in the championship. So, and if you have an IR spot, I don't think you could put him on it. Wouldn't it be 4 weeks technically in most leagues?
Yeah, and I highly doubt if they think he's coming back this year. I highly doubt they put him on the IR.
So, I mean, but your fantasy IR though is at 4 weeks. I forget. Or is it 2 weeks?
I think it's 3. I think.
So you can't put him on your IR. You probably got to keep him on your bench.
Yep.
Which sucks. So anyway, that's what you got to do. Marcus Mariota has a knee injury. He's probably going to go on IR. Desmond Ridder was already announced as the starter this weekend against those New Orleans Saints, and seems like he's going to start the rest of the season. We spoke about this already, but it is news that we are bringing to you guys. Just got to see what happens this week. I would not feel comfortable playing Drake London, just to be clear.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Tyler Huntley has a concussion, and I didn't realize this until today, but then I also saw the comment that Harbaugh made where he's like, oh, he could recite the months backwards right now or something stupid like that. As of Monday, he's still in concussion protocol, and no update on Lamar Jackson's knee as of Monday. Dameon Pierce has some ankle injury that he's working with. Lovie Smith is unsure if he plays this week. That's all we got. Mike White has a rib injury. The Jets are preparing as if he is playing. He is day-to-day. And you know what, Nick? I'll be honest. I was kind of considering playing him over Joe Burrow this week, but I don't know if he's got an injury. I don't know, because he has an awesome matchup against the Lions, but an injury kind of scares me.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
Just got to monitor it. DJ Moore has an ankle injury. He got an MRI today. The report that I read said we get results on Wednesday, but then I see an updated report 3 hours later. There was a knee sprain. He's day-to-day, and it's not significant. I don't think you could trust him in your fantasy playoffs anyway. So
no, definitely not. I think he finished with, I want to say 0.6 on the week.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But I know he got injured, but still pretty bad. Amari Cooper has a hip injury day to day. Not super duper worried about him, but monitor it. Brock Purdy has an oblique injury. He got an MRI on Monday. He's day to day. As far as I can tell, it's not significant, and he will still play against the Seahawks on Thursday. If he was healthy, same situation as Mike White, I'd say he's a really good start this week. But
yeah.
We'll talk about it on our Thursday show for Thursday Night Football. For the Bengals, Tyler Boyd with a finger injury. It was dislocated. He could miss a game or two. He just has to manage the pain is the report that I read. Hayden Hurst has a calf injury. He's week to week. T. Higgins has a hamstring injury and is day-to-day. I think he's going to play Sunday against the Bucs. And Jeff Wilson has a hip injury. He is also day-to-day. So not many updates we could give you, but doing the best we can. We'll have better updates as the week goes on. Moving on to the waiver wire. Not a lot of players to talk about. We don't have defenses here. I should probably go back and see what defenses you guys can still kind of pick for this week or the weeks going on, and I'll do that in a second. But we'll talk about some guys off the waiver wire that you may want to pick up this week. So Nick had an idea of how this segment should be run. Did not discuss this, before the show, but Nick, I'm going to let you lead this segment because I wasn't sure how you wanted it led. And so you have an idea. I'm going to let you run with it. So I'm going to let you run with the waiver segment since you actually Nick actually put these guys in the segment. A couple of guys we probably would have agreed on, but take it away.
So I pretty much went across ESPN, Fantasy Pros, and a couple different articles online from some of the other networks. And I said, who are these guys saying are the top waiver wire ads? And I agreed with some of them. I disagreed with a lot of them. So I wanted, rather than, just say, all right, here's our number one guy. You're in the playoffs now, right? Like, doesn't matter who your number one is. The number one guy, like, whatever, probably not breaking the lineup. So the whole point of this segment is, who should you genuinely pick up and trust this week or at a later point in the playoffs where they're worth the ad? So we're going to go down the list, and it'll probably be a little bit longer of a Tuesday episode, but we're going to break down each of these guys. So the first one I have written here, who's the number one guy on a lot of lists, Jerick McKinnon. This past week had 6 carries for 22 yards, but he made his mark in the receiving game. 9 targets, 7 catches, 112 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, Nick, are you trusting or prioritizing Jerick McKinnon at all on your waiver wire?
I'll prioritize him if I have a running back slot to fill him in a league where I have to start Dameon Pierce at the moment. I also have Pacheco and Latavius Murray, but that might be a situation where I do want to prioritize Jerick McKinnon. Would I trust to play him this week? Kansas City has...
They are at Houston. It's kind of like, how do you bench him there? After this,
I think but here's the thing. Pacheco had 80 yards on the ground. McKinnon at 0. He was the receiving option. I'm not sure if this is a 1-game wonder or not. I would prioritize him. I don't think I'd play him though, unless it's a deeper league. I think in a 10 or 12 man league, I wouldn't play him. In any of my 3 leagues right now, I wouldn't play him.
So his playoff schedule is going to be at Houston, hosting Seattle, hosting Denver. At Houston, one of the worst teams against the running backs. Seattle, we all know how terrible they are against running backs. And Denver, who he just put his 32-point game on. So I do think he has to be the number one priority this week. And I do think he should, he should be rostered at least by anybody in those fantasy playoffs, especially if you have the bye this week.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Because this will be a good week to gauge his ability.
Yep.
Now we'll go to Chuba Hubbard, the number 2 guy on a lot of lists. 14 carries, did not outrush Dante Foreman on the week. He had less attempts, and Dante Foreman was dealing with the injury. 74 yards and a touchdown. Also saw 3 catches for 25 yards. So we got some good usage. Nick, how do we feel? His playoff schedule is Pittsburgh, Detroit, and at Tampa.
I think if you have an open spot, you pick him up, but I'm not super crazy about it. I still think Foreman's the number one guy over there. I think Hubbard can get his opportunities, but I think he's only good for a spot start. Hypothetically, let's say you have Saquon Barkley and you pick up Chuba Hubbard this week and Barkley goes down with an ACL injury and you need to put a running back in, you have a viable option and you don't scramble next week. So I think it's just to have a viable option if you do need a running back. If you don't need a running back, then, there's no reason to at that point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he should be rostered, but I don't think he's playable yet.
Yep.
We need to see more of it, and you need to see him out-touch Foreman before I think I would put him in my lineup.
Yep.
Next up, Chris Moore. You saw injuries to the Texans wide receivers. Well, Chris Moore took over the wide receiver one role over there this week. 11 targets, 10 catches, 124 yards up against the Dallas Cowboys. Their fantasy playoffs is also spectacular. Going to Kansas City, who they'll probably be playing from behind from all game, at Tennessee, who is the worst team to wide receivers, and then Jacksonville championship week. So very favorable schedule. Nick, are you rostering Chris Moore?
I am not. I think Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins could both come back this week, and I just don't want to play Texans. I just don't trust Texans. I mean, if I have to play Dameon Pierce, I will, but aside from that, I don't want to play a Texan to win a fantasy championship. I just don't trust them.
I agree. It was his only game over 5 catches on the year. I know there were other injuries to receivers, but at this point, I don't think he's rosterable. I think there's other receivers and players like McKinnon that I would prioritize.
Yep,
Next,
totally
someone Nick wanted on his all boom team that I begrudgingly said no to, and he had I think his best game or second best game of the season. It is DJ Chark. 6 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Last 3 weeks, he is averaging 15 points per game. Nick, he's going up against the Jets this week. What are you thinking?
I don't want to miss week. And if I don't want to miss week, then I mean, am I picking him up for next week? Maybe. But then it's like, how deep is my roster? Like I wanted to play DJ Chark in my dynasty league this week because, I had Chris Olave that I had the bench because of the bye. Like I would play Olave over Chark every week of the playoffs. So I don't think he should be a priority ad. If you're in a 16-man league, maybe, but Jameson Williams clearly got involved in this offense. I could see Jameson Williams being a bigger breakout target over the fantasy playoffs than Chark. But, it depends on the Lions matchup. The Lions matchup is not good right now against the Jets, so I would not prioritize them for this week.
What if you have the bye week? And maybe you had Deebo Samuel on that team.
Then I would prioritize him. But again, is Jameson Williams also available? I think I might give him a higher priority because I don't know who's going to get more snap shares, more targets over the next few weeks, honestly.
Jameson Williams is the next guy on the list who is rostered in 27% of leagues. So a little more rostered than Chark, both available in most. This past week, only 1 catch for 41 yards and the touchdown, which did give him a solid fantasy day. Nick, you just said you think you'd probably prioritize him over Chark.
I would prioritize him over Chark, especially if I had a bye and I needed a receiver to play. But again, part of this is also, evaluate your roster and see who you could also play keep away from. If somebody's going to need a receiver, play keep away from whoever has Deebo Samuel in your league. They're going to need a receiver. Again, Saquon goes down this week and that team advances, play keep away. So even if there's guys on your roster that you don't think you're going to play in your fantasy playoffs and you don't think other people will play, play keep away. And we'll talk about it on Stash or Trash as players that you may want to let go so you can play keep away. But, I'll just throw one name out there. Like James Robinson is owned in 52% of leagues. Even James Cook is owned in 52% of leagues. And whether you believe in James Cook's talent or not, the Bills don't run the ball. So those are guys I would drop for a couple of these guys on the waiver wire that you can play keep away with.
I agree with you entirely on that. Next up, Donovan Peoples-Jones. This past week had his best game, his most targets on the year, his best fantasy game on the year, been pretty consistent receiver. Nick and I have, I might spoil the take for Nick, but Nick and I have been saying pick him up for weeks now. 12 targets, 8 catches, 114 yards, first 100-yard game of the year. Since week 4, only has 2 games under 11 fantasy points. One of those was 9. So, I mean, he's been very consistent, just hasn't had the ceiling yet, and it looks like over 100 yards. So, Nick, he's got Baltimore, New Orleans, and Washington in his playoffs. What are you thinking?
I would definitely pick him up. He's been very effective throughout, especially the last 6-7 weeks. But Sean Watson obviously used him a lot in the past week. Watson's getting more comfortable in the offense. I think you pick him up, and if it's a keeper league, I think he's a possible keeper going into next year as well.
I totally agree on that. I think him and McKinnon are the 1A, 1B pickups, depending on your priority.
Yep.
Next, we are going to someone that Nick, I believe, cut in the league. Evan Engram, tight end.
I did cut him in the league.
For the Jaguars, the tight end position is so thin that he put up 11 catches, 162 yards, 2 touchdowns, clearly his best game of the year, and jumped all the way to the tight end 4 on the season. Nick, with that kind of ceiling, what do you think?
I don't want to prioritize him because he has a really rough matchup next week against Dallas. And then I think he has Denver or something.
Jets and then Houston.
The Jets and then Houston. So you probably wouldn't play him until the championship matchup. And I think he's very boomer bust. He's had back-to-back games that were pretty spectacular games. Obviously, the Lions game was against the inferior defense. This defense he faced was a little bit better. But still, I just wouldn't prioritize it. He
is such a boom bust guy. I mean, it's either 14 plus or sub 5 for most of his games this year. My logic is if you're playing a tight end that's getting you 8 to 10 points a week, I would rather play Evan Engram at this point because you need ceiling for the fantasy playoffs. So do I think he gets limited against Dallas and the Jets? Maybe, but I'd rather take the upside of him booming than, I'm trying to think of some guys like someone like Foster Moreau that's been in lineups with Waller out or one of those other mid-end tight ends. We got 2 injured quarterbacks, last 2 guys on the waiver wire. We will go to Brock Purdy, the first rookie quarterback to beat Tom Brady. Purdy over the last 2 weeks, 14 points against Miami, 22 against Tampa, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Or 5 touchdowns if you include the ground. Nick, are you comfortable playing him this week? Short week against Seattle, has Washington after that, and then goes to Vegas for the championship.
Listen, Seattle's a good play. Vegas is a good play. Washington's a pretty sneaky good defense, and we'll talk about him in a second. So I wouldn't be comfortable in that one. But against Seattle this week, if you're in a Lamar Jackson situation, I'd play him. I mean, I have to look at some of these other matchups. Like if Jared Goff's your starting quarterback, I'd play him over Jared Goff this week. Let's see, who else can I talk about here? Derek Carr. I think I play him over Derek Carr. I don't think Carr is trustable. I can't bench Kyler Murray, but that's a tough matchup. But Trevor, I mean, I know the Cowboys defense looked like Swiss cheese this week, but they have up and down games. I feel like they're due for a pretty good defensive performance against Trevor Lawrence. So, I think I'd play him over Trevor Lawrence as well. So there's a couple guys that I would definitely play him over. And you know what? Here's another one. Justin Fields. I don't think I'd play Justin Fields against the Philly defense. I know it's going to be really tough to bench Justin Fields, but it's tough. That might be our bust of the week right there. That might end up being the bust of the week. We'll see.
Very interesting take. I do like the pickup. I think Purdy is definitely rosterable. There was a lot of quarterbacks that got hurt this past week. If you're a Lamar owner, I think Purdy has to be your second quarterback priority. But we are going to the number one, for me at least, for the fantasy playoffs, Mike White, New York Jet. Last 3 weeks, he's averaging over 300 passing yards a game, averaging 17 fantasy points per game. He has the easiest playoff schedule out of all quarterbacks, going hosting Detroit, hosting Jacksonville, and then at Seattle. Nick, Mike White, the moment everyone's been waiting for.
No, I think if you need a quarterback, I'd prioritize him. I'm in an interesting situation where my 3 quarterbacks for my the 3 playoff leagues that I'm in are Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Kyler Murray. So I did pick up Mike White in 2 of those leagues, but Hurts is the quarterback 1, Burrow's the quarterback 4, and Kyler, I think he missed a game or 2, but is the quarterback 11, and his average is still, 18 fantasy points. So I'm in a situation where I would almost play keep away, but I don't know which one I'd start Mike White over. If Mike White was healthy, I would seriously consider it this week. Not because I doubt Burrow, but only because I think they could run the ball a little bit more. It depends on the health of the receivers. But if you tell me Burrow's without Boyd and Higgins, doesn't worry me about Burrow's play as a football player. But as a fantasy player, I'm not sure where his stats are going to be. So I would consider playing Mike White over Burrow. I would not play him over Jalen Hurts. Kyler has Denver, but like it's just so hard to bench Kyler Murray. So that's another one that I'd tinker with. But
so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go through the top 16 quarterbacks on the season. I know that's a lot, but we'll just kind of rapid fire who you would rather play Mike White over. Jalen
just
Hurts,
this week or the rest of the season?
Rest of the season. Jalen Hurts.
No.
I know you have to probably look at playoff stats, but for the most part, I mean, you pretty much know. Patrick Mahomes.
No.
I agree. Josh Allen.
No.
Joe Burrow.
How healthy are his receivers?
We'll see. He has at Tampa, at New England, hosting Buffalo. That's probably one of the tougher playoff matchups. Championship week not, but
I mean, if you tell me I have to lock one in right now, I'm locking in Joe Burrow. If it's like a best ball league, I would still lock him in.
Justin Fields.
I'll play Mike White.
Geno Smith.
I'll play Mike White.
Lamar, who's number 7. I know we don't know about the injuries.
I don't think we could count him here.
Baltimore's quarterback.
Mike White.
I agree. Trevor Lawrence.
He has the Jets. Mike White.
Justin Herbert.
He's a stat sheet stuffer, the best in the game. Play Herbert.
Okay. Daniel Jones.
Mike White. I'm not trusting Daniel Jones. Not a chance.
Kirk Cousins.
What's his playoff schedule? He's a stat sheet stuffer. And what time does he play? I need to know what time he plays at.
Indy Giants at Green Bay.
Indy's at 1:00. What time is?
I don't know.
Let's see. Is Indy at 1:00? Giants, Packers at 4. So that's your championship, and Giants at 1. I will play Kirk Cousins. He's a stat sheet stuffer, and he actually has been very good this year for the most part.
Jared Goff.
I don't know what his next 2 matchups are, but if I play Jared Goff this week,
Jets are next week.
The Jets are next week,
or like this.
No, the Jets are this week.
Jets, but then Carolina, who we talked about being a sneaky good defense, and then Chicago championship.
I would love to play golf. I don't know if I get out of this first round. If I have the bye, I'll play golf.
Tua.
What's his playoff schedule?
At Buffalo, hosting Green Bay, at New England.
Mike White.
Kyler Murray. I agree. I'd lean Kyler for consistency. Yeah. And then Tom Brady.
Brady has the Panthers, the Bengals, and who else?
Arizona.
I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't bench Brady.
Okay, so you had in the top 15 quarterbacks, there were 7 that you would rather play over Mike White.
Yep.
I'm not looking at the back 16, and obviously there's some guys that based on the matchup you play over, but if you're that far low, my logic is then you can comfortably rank Mike White and his schedule, that combination, as top 10 rest of the year, meaning he needs to be rostered.
Yep, I think that's a fair take. It's just again, like I when I'm sitting here with Burrow, Hurts, and Kyler, and obviously not everybody's blessed to be in that situation. Like it's just tough for me to sit there and be like, I need to go pick up Mike White.
Of course, I get that.
I'll roster him as a backup, but I don't know when I'd play him. Is the take, I guess. So anyway, I put 4 defenses in here that I personally like. I don't know how you feel about them, but matchup based this week. Owned in under 53% of leagues. I'm saying that because of Pittsburgh. So if you got to go to your waiver wire for a defense, I've selected the Saints. Owned in 40% of leagues against the Atlanta Falcons with Desmond Ridder starting at quarterback. Cleveland Browns owned in 27% of leagues against Baltimore. I really doubt Lamar's playing. So against Huntley, if he clears concussion protocol. Pittsburgh Steelers against the Carolina Panthers. I do not think the Carolina Panthers have a good offense. They smushed a really pathetic Seahawks defense. And the Washington Commanders, 34% versus the New York Giants. The last time they faced the Giants, I think they scored like 8 fantasy points. So depending on what defense you currently have right now, either of these defenses might be a better matchup. So how would you rank these defenses? Let's say you're in a situation where you have the Seattle defense, because guess who had the Seattle defense? I have the Seahawks and the Pittsburgh defense on my dynasty team. So I already have Pittsburgh. But let's say you're in the situation where your only defense is Seattle and you 100% need to drop them. How do you prioritize them? For the sake of the argument, Lamar's not playing. And that's the only thing I got to clarify, I guess.
Number 1 would be New Orleans. I think that front 7, that team overall is elite. I believe they're coming off the bye versus
They
Atlanta,
are.
who season-ending injury to their quarterback. Offense is an absolute shambles. So I think the Saints would be my number one on this list. My number two pickup is actually not on the list. It is the Carolina Panthers defense, which I know you just spoke about. The Carolina Panthers in ESPN, like the normal defensive scoring,
Yep.
are actually ranked number 3 over the last 4 weeks. So they've gotten better on defense. Against Seattle, they let up 24. The 3 prior weeks were 15, 13, 10 points allowed. They have forced, hold on, let me do the quick math, 14 sacks over that span, so averaging 4 sacks a game. They have forced an average of an interception a game and half a fumble. So overall, they've improved their defense, and they go up against Pittsburgh, who I don't think that offense has much of a ceiling. So, or I think they have a very low ceiling. So
Yeah.
I think they're a safe play with a lot of turnover force potential.
And then they own 7.6% of leagues, so they're probably available. Or is that
Yep.
they're your seconds? How would you rank the other 3 then?
My number 3 would probably be the other side of the ball. I'd probably go Pittsburgh there.
Okay.
Because like Nick said, we don't like those division matchups too much. So
Yep.
Cleveland, Baltimore. Cleveland would probably be next.
Yep.
Washington would be my 5th priority, but I do think it's a good play. I'm just scared about Sunday Night Football. Just got flex there, and I know the Giants have struggled. I think they're 1-4-1 in their last 6, but
Yeah.
I do think that Brian Dable is going to have a vendetta against this matchup.
Okay, interesting. Moving on to stash or trash, we're going to talk about some players that you may want to send to that waiver wire to get some of these players for your fantasy playoffs. So first off, James Robinson is owned in 52% of leagues, and I just wrote in all caps, why?
Yeah, no, he should not be owned in any leagues anymore.
Nope. His other running back, Michael Carter, 78% of leagues.
So they actually brought him in as the 3rd down back, which is what the projected role was going to be for the year, with Breece Hall there. So I don't know if I don't see how you're going to trust him, even though he has these favorable matchups. So if that's, I wouldn't cut him yet because he did play with an injury. So it's possible that they just.
What if you could get one of these other players like DJ?
If I could get McKinnon,
McKinnon, Mike White,
McKinnon, Donovan Peoples-Jones, yes. Outside of that, probably not. I don't think there's any. Or well, if you need quarterback, then Mike White. But
what if you have a situation where one of your quarterback is a really bad matchup in the 2nd round? Can you drop him for Mike White?
Yes.
Carter. All right, there you go.
Yeah.
Jeff Wilson, 83%. I know he dealt with an injury. Most didn't have a good game either. The Dolphins seem to have lost steam. You want to talk about peaking at the right time? The Dolphins feel like they hit their peak already. How do you feel about Jeff Wilson, though?
I'm not willing to cut him yet, not even for McKinnon or Hubbard.
Yep.
Just because we know the ceiling of that offense.
Yeah.
And it feels like a disservice to cut him.
That's kind of how I agree. By the way, Terry Hill had another nuts game on Sunday night. Like, I think he's gonna finish as the fantasy wide receiver 1. After a lot of people talk smack about him, probably us a little bit too. I still had him ranked pretty high, but yeah. MVS 50%. I would cut this guy.
I don't know why he's on rosters.
Kadarius Toney's going to be back next week. He was really close this week.
I don't get it.
Kareem Hunt 76%. He hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points in seems like 8 weeks. Like, I get it. You're holding the handcuff, but at this point, like, it's the argument I made last week. I know Hilliard on Tennessee is injured at the moment. I know that, but my argument is, why is Kareem Hunt owned and like Hilliard is? If you're so desperate to hold a handcuff, why are you holding Kareem Hunt? I know the talent's there, so I understand the argument, but he's not getting the opportunity, so you're just wasting a handcuff at that point.
My logic is going to be quite simple. If you wanted to hold him for this long, then you can't let go. God forbid Chubb goes down. He's one of the best handcuffs in football at the running back position.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't roster him, but like you've held him for 14 weeks now. Like there's no reason to cut him.
Kareem Hunt and Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson in the same backfield. Man, that's awesome. That's something. Latavius Murray, 77% of leagues, had a pretty crappy game against the Chiefs.
I wouldn't cut him yet, but I still wouldn't play him. It's like that's one of those uncomfortable ones. Oh, Kyler Murray is down on the field.
Yep, we just got that alert.
Non-contact injury.
Yep, it looks like Kyler Murray's. That's not great. Okay, Mike White.
Mike
There we
White
go.
to the moon.
Do I
All
have
right,
Mike
there's
White already in that league?
6 players now.
Do I have Mike White already in that league? Because that league I've already lost Cooper Kupp. Let's see who I even have in that league. Do I have a backup quarterback? Let's see. Let's find out. I have Brady. That's who I didn't pick up Mike White. Okay. Well, it's a good thing this week doesn't matter because Kyler's going to score 60.66 fantasy points. This is also bad for your Jets because the Patriots are going to win now.
Yeah, that's gonna
James Cook, 52% of leagues.
cut him.
I would cut him. And Michael Gallup at 59%.
Cut him. They also just added T.Y. Hilton, which I don't think it's going to be that relevant. But
He's still a guy. He's still there.
But it's gonna take away from his workload. It's gonna take away from his time on the field. Period.
Alrighty. Well, that was today's show. Thank you for listening to it. Hopefully we helped you guys out and helped you with your waivers, and hopefully you get the waiver players that you do want. If you enjoyed the show and you're listening on an audio streaming platform, iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please drop a like on this video, share the links with your league mates and your friends. We'd appreciate that. Keep connecting with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, then Facebook, and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you. Best of luck on your waiver wire, and let's start getting ready for the fantasy playoffs.